Aloha, Audleyites. I'm here to talk about a thing I call priority. So I've made another slideshow. Don't really know how my slideshows are doing in terms of how much you guys are liking them, but I've made this slideshow to talk about what I call priority. It's sort of a term I've borrowed from Dota, but I use it to describe or to better define Halo player roles and how players fit into a team composition. And I've got the note there at the bottom. Halo is a fast-paced, fluid game, and players definitely have to be able to play outside some rigid sort of role in order to really stay at the top level of play. But when you take a look at how players tend to play and their tendencies and play styles, you'll see that oftentimes players on a team definitely fit into at least one of the priority categories or the roles I define in the following slideshow. So with that, we'll start off with priority one. This is the one everyone calls the Slayer. These are your snipe downs, your royal twos, your Miquins and aces. Just generally, this is the guy you give the power weapon to. And when I say power weapon, I usually mean sniper. Now, oftentimes they're the most skilled player on your team, and they're treated kind of like a carry in MOBAs, like League of Legends. You make sure they've got everything they need to go off. And on maps like Truth, where you've got the plasma caster, which some people don't really have a hang of yet, you'll see these. Or in Breakout, you'll often see the priority one player is usually the one who gets precedence for DMR or BR. I'll go over a little later one of the examples of a team that doesn't follow this trend. On Fathom, the priority one player will be the one that either gets the railgun or the light rifle, depending on the team's general feeling. Sometimes priority one players will get both. Sometimes they'll stick to one. It really depends on the team. And as an example of a priority one player and just how much control of power ups he gets, Snipe Down gets overshields, camos, railguns. He gets the light rifle. He gets battle rifles, DMRs. He gets whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. And because he's so good as an individual player, he puts them to use and shows why a priority one player is such a great thing for your team to have. If you don't have a priority one player, your team is probably going to be lacking and not really showing up to dominate in terms of just how your team is able to get the kills on the board. So after priority one, we go obviously to priority two, the dominator. These are your in-your-face aggressive players. They don't need power weapons, and a lot of times they'll just use their pistol or their assault rifle. In older games, they'd use a battle rifle or DMR, and they just don't miss shots. But they're the ones that just push constantly, and they're really like tanks or bruisers in MOBAs. If you compared them to other sports, they'd be like a fullback or a linebacker. They're just like constantly in your face kind of players. And those are Roy, APG, Spartan, Ninja. Really just constantly hold forward and outbe our kids kind of players. Their best weapon, beyond their gun skill, because as I said, they rarely miss, is their mouth. These are players that have to small talk. They can't just call out targets. They have to say where they're going, who they need to come help them, what their plan is. They're like, hey, I'm pushing here. Hey, come help me over here. Watch me from here. Just constantly small talking to make sure that when they initiate, they have follow up. Because these are your frontline players. And because of the communication response that they absolutely need to be able to be successful in this role, that's why I have them listed as priority two compared to the next role, which I'll go over in just a minute. These are usually players that have the most kills on their team, but they don't necessarily have a high KD ratio unless their teams are just dominating. Their KD will stick kind of close to 1.0 because they're just frontliners. They're going to die a lot, but they're also going to get a lot of kills. In Counter-Strike, you'll see priority 2 players tend to be the entry fragger. They're going to die plenty, but they're extremely skilled in terms of ability to aim, and their job is to either take somebody down with them or deal lots of damage or set up their team to follow up and get kills. So with that, we'll move on to priority 3. This is the hunter. This isn't really a priority tier you see often. Like, they're basically priority 1 players, but they don't get power weapons. However, they often have a selfish focus on keeping themselves alive over teammates, which is part of the reason you don't see them on top teams. Because if you have one selfish player, it's alright, because you can play around that. If you have two selfish players, it gets a little bit stretched thin, and if you don't have the right mix of players around that setup, then it can become problematic. But sometimes you'll see I have Pistola, Frosty, Hysteria, and Cloud listed as some examples of some priority 3 players, and like you know Pistola is one of the best players in Halo, like of all time. Frosty right now, completely on fire, completely dominating, and even though he might be the best player on CLG, well, statistically Snakebite has been the best player, but Frosty has been just extremely dominant. He might actually be more of a priority 2 player. As I've noticed Snakebite is usually the one getting light rifles and kind of stuff, but priority 3 players, they're hard to kill and have a lot of gun skill. They have higher KD ratio than priority 2 because they're usually in power positions or in safe positions in general, rather than just pushing up and setting up for objectives. And if your priority 1 Slayer is having a bad game, or you're on fire as a priority 3, or if you're just like, I'm in the area, can I just grab this? Then you'll let your priority 3 player take a power weapon. They'll go off, they'll dominate, because it's not like priority 3 players are bad. Because you see that list: Pistola, Frosty, Hysteria. Those are like constantly top players in every game they've played. Cloud, he's actually a priority 1 player usually when he's on a team. I listed him as a priority 3 because on CLG he had to take a backseat to Royal 2 because of just how much Royal 2 needs the long range weapons and the sniper. But Cloud can be priority 1 or priority 3 just as easily as anyone else. Pistola, he more defines what I mean by priority 3 because he's not actively looking to pick up power weapons, but when he has them, he's really good with them. Hysteria the same way. Frosty, he was definitely a priority 1 on Team Daytona, but now that he's on CLG, again, taking the backseat to Royal 2 and to some degree Snakebite when it comes to long range weapons. So you get an idea of just what the priority 3 player is. They're just insanely hard to kill, slippery players. You could think of them as assassins in other games. Priority 4, that's the Ranger. That's the guy sitting back, putting shots in everybody. They're fantastic teammates. In fact, they're pretty much just known for being good teammates, as you'll see with the list of such players: Chig, Ogre 2, Victory X. I have Lethal on there. I have him with an asterisk because his individual skill and his playstyle, he plays a little bit more up than most priority 4s. He's kind of a hybrid 2-4 kind of player. These players, except for uh, except for some outliers, they don't show up dominant statistically, and they're usually not praised for individual skill. Again, Lethal an exception there. But their positioning usually fills gaps, cuts off the map, and ensures the team just keeps clicking on all cylinders as it's intended to. These players will usually fight from afar, and they'll grab BRs whenever possible. Like because of how often they need to cut off routes and such, having a gun that can fight the pistol off from farther away is just better for their playstyle. And even within this category, there's a lot of variation in style. Like Ogre 2 focuses on zoning. I call him less of a ranger and more of a controller. And some, like Chig or Assault, will focus on responding to callouts, helping their teammates get good spawns. And KD ratios for this position, they may change based off the individual. Some don't do that well in terms of kills and deaths. Others do great. Some do well in certain game types, but not well in others. And as I mentioned, breakout priority 1s may usually get the BR or DMR. Liquid are a team that play around their priority 4 taking the BR or DMR and breakout. They give it to Chig, and that highlights some of the variation in team views on priority and how important it is to be able to adapt to your team's strengths. Like, you can't stick to these things as a rigid set of rules. Like, priorities are a rule of thumb, and although a lot of Halo is played with your thumbs, you've also got to play Halo with your brain. And with that, I'm going to move on to priority 5, typically the smartest player on a team, the priority 5. This is the agent. That's what I've given the name. The agent is basically a sacrificial lamb. I call them the agent because they're usually carrying something or they're usually on the enemy's back line somewhere. Whether by choice or circumstance, they're giving up their own lives to make a play, especially an objective. These are Lunchbox, Rhino, Nated, although a lot of people will label him as a slayer due to his performance in Halo 3, after Halo Reach, he's become a much more objective-oriented player. If you're just coming back into Halo 5 uh, after taking a break during the Reach and Halo 4 and H2A era, you might be completely shocked to know that Nated plays a very selfless style of play in-game, and so he's really more of an objective agent-type player. And Hines, I also have him listed as an agent. He's actually a player that gets power weapon priority compared to, say, Lunchbox or Ryanoob, who don't really need power weapons. Ryanoob focuses on flanking positions to get an advantage, and Lunchbox just focuses on having whoever the Slayer is on his team and his brother Roy playing up front, let them get all the kills while he just positions himself to get where he needs to be to dominate spawns or grab an objective or whatever. And Hines, on the other hand, grabs Halo Reach grenade launcher. He was amazing with that weapon. He was generally really good with rockets whenever he grabs them. So you see, agents aren't necessarily like just negative players. If they go negative 100 over the course of an event, it doesn't mean they were doing badly. It just means that they didn't get a lot of kills. They'll die a lot. That's how they play. Ryanoob, as I said, it focuses really hard on flanking. Most aren't as stealthy as him. Hines is kind of in your face, similar to APG. It's really interesting watching them as a duo, just working together, constantly talking to each other on how to position, and they do a great job of just smothering opponents together. In Slayer game types and Breakout, you may see Priority 5s completely change their playstyle because death isn't that good of a thing to have happen to you in Slayer, and especially Breakout. But sometimes, even in Slayer, getting a good flank at the cost of your own life can end up having players turn and look at you. Your teammates get shots in their backs now, and it turns into you dying for your team to get 2 kills, even if you didn't do any damage. So distraction medals are a great thing to get as an agent. Other than that, though, these are the 5 categories I have for priority. I've given them nicknames to make them a little better. I'm trying to avoid using support because there gets to be so much homogenization between priority 4 and 5 on what people will call support, because everyone will call Chiga support, they'll call Lunchboxes support, and they have really vastly different playstyles. And even within the priority categories, I pointed out there's a difference in playstyle. So just breaking that down and listing it by how much focus they get from teammates in terms of power weapons, power positions, communication response, all of that just combines to show what their actual position in a team is in terms of how much the team plays around that player. And priority 5s, although their team don't appear to be playing around them, they're the ones playing around their team and making sure their team are going to get the win in the process. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Where prize pool's at $2 million. I like the big number slide. And just as a reminder, before I close out the video, priorities are not a be-all, end-all of analyzing pro player gameplay. Everyone has their own style. Each team has their own chemistry and composition that they have to work around. Any team can find a way to win if they just learn how to play around their play styles, but you'll often find the successful teams don't have a whole lot of overlap in their like most comfortable playstyles, and teams with talented players of the same priority will tend to have a lot more trouble in terms of clicking. Like, for example, you see the Winter Fox roster that's in the process of breaking up, I believe. They didn't have a real priority one. They had a priority two in Spartan, two priority fours. Shooter may be a priority three, but they have uh, that in Arcanum and Shooter, and then a priority five in Ryan Noob. So you really need at least a priority one. Priority twos help a lot to relieve a lot of pressure for priority ones and threes, and like open up opportunities for priority fours and fives to get into the positions they want. But other than that, like there's definitely room for malleability in terms of this. It's not like set in stone, concrete. It's an abstract way to just better describe players' play styles and how they fit into a team dynamic. And even when a player moves to a different team, their priority on that team can change, especially the best players in the game. But you'll see, like, if you watch a player closely, they stick to these like generic play styles overall. When you really think about it, they'll fit with one more than they fit with another. But with that, I'm going to close out this video. Hope you guys catch on to the priority. I hope that takes off. I hope the definitions work a little bit better. We've got Slayer, Dominator, Hunter, Ranger, Agent. You can call priority twos tanks if you want. You can make up your own names, but other than that, let's try to think of Halo players in terms of how much the team plays around them or how much they play around their teammates. And with that, I'm going to call this video. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, whatever. Follow me on Twitter at Tiberius Audley. Follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Tiberius Audley. I've been streaming commentary for scrims and whatnot. I intend to scrim ladder matches and Halo tournaments whenever possible. And there may be some other appearances for me coming soon. Stay tuned for more news. And with that, I will say aloha.